Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hi, this is great. So, if you have a bulletin, there's a couple of inserts. There is one, which is an advertisement for our Wednesday night class that will begin this Wednesday. What will we find when we go back to the New Testament? And we're going to be looking at 12 priorities of the New Testament church. And then this is the outline for today's message. A few years ago, I wrote a commentary on the book of Daniel, and I called it Courage in the Time of Compromise. And over a period of a number of Wednesday nights, we covered all 12 chapters of the book of Daniel from the very beginning, chapter 1, where Daniel is young, to the ending point of the book of Daniel, which is the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. Daniel is one of the most interesting people in the Bible. And this series is going to be a practical outgrowth, a practical application of the more technical study we had on Wednesday nights. But I want us to think about Daniel for a few Sundays. At the age of 15, a teenager, he was carried away as a prisoner to a foreign land, yet he rose to the pinnacle of physical and spiritual success. So I want to spend several weeks talking about Daniel and how we can be a spiritual success like he was. If you're a teenager like Daniel was when we're introduced to him, you can be an outstanding success for the Lord right now. I'm not talking about when you're in your 20s or when you're in your 30s, but right now as a teen, you can be an outstanding Christian. We're living in a society where traditional values have been turned upside down. And so we're going to illustrate that with my bucket. This is not a Lowe's bucket. This is a Sherwin-Williams bucket. So we're going to let this bucket represent moral values, traditional moral values. And now we're going to turn the bucket upside down. You all follow me, right? It's not that difficult. Good, good. So when I point to the bucket, I'm going to be referring to our upside down moral values. And I'm going to put that right here. And I put a sign on both sides so I can catch you here and catch you here. You can see that. I don't know if you can see that very well. But that's what happened in the nation of Israel long ago. They fell into immorality and injustice and idolatry, that is, putting things ahead of God. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 5 and verse 20, which was about 125 years before Daniel, but the principle applies, it says, "How terrible it will be for people who call good things bad and bad things good, who think darkness is light and light is darkness, who think sour is sweet and sweet is sour." The Jewish nation gave up on morality, and so God allowed a foreign king of the Babylonian Empire named Nebuchadnezzar to come and destroy the nation of Israel and carry the people away to Babylon for 70 years. And among the captives was a 15-year-old named Daniel, along with his 3 teenage friends. And they had lost their country because no one was paying attention to what God said. No one cared anymore what God said. In Psalm 82:5, it says, "Because you are in darkness, all the foundations of society are shaken to the core. In this country, the foundation of our moral and ethical values are being shaken. So I have a picture. That is the Ark Park in Kentucky. In Kentucky, a group of people have built a replica of Noah's Ark, and the park opened recently. And a long time ago in the book of Genesis, God said to Noah, I want you to build an ark because the world's so wicked, I'm going to have to send a flood and wipe everybody out except you and your family. So he built this ark, not this ark, this is a replica, not the actual ark, and they spent about a year on it. And then they came off of the ark, and Noah's 3 sons and their wives became the foundation to repopulate the earth. Well, after the flood, the entire climate of the earth was changed, and there was now a phenomenon called the rainbow. And God said, I'm putting this rainbow in the sky to be a sign and a symbol that I will never send a global flood again. Well, the park opened, and the LGBT community is now upset. The lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, they're claiming that the Ark Park has stolen their rainbow. And they said they're going to do everything they can to make the Ark look gay. And so they're now calling it the Gay Ark. Because we didn't steal the rainbow symbol, did we? We've had the rainbow symbol a long, long time. But this is the kind of things that are going on in our country today. The good news is that no matter how morally broken society is, God says to his people, including our teens, I want you to have moral courage in a time of compromise. Now, the book of Daniel covers 70 years of his life from the age of 15 to 85. And he becomes the second most powerful man in the most powerful empire without losing his integrity and without compromising his morals. And he's a young guy who's never going to see his homeland again. Yet he stays faithful to the Lord. So we're going to take a look at the first 7 verses of Daniel chapter 1, and we'll be coming back to these next week when we talk about teenagers and peer pressure. And so I want the teens, I want our teens, our young people, to come here. You're here today. Come next week. Come the following week. These lessons are for you. In fact, keep coming every Sunday until I tell you not to. In Daniel 1:1, during the third year of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, about 605 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it with his armies. The Lord gave a pagan guy. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim of Judah. When Nebuchadnezzar returned to Babylon, he took with him some of the sacred objects of the temple of God and placed them in the treasure house of his God in the land of Babylonia. Sometimes God uses ungodly people to carry out his plan, right? God uses a bad person to discipline his children, the nation of Israel. And God even allows Nebuchadnezzar to take out sacred objects from Solomon's temple and carry them and put them in the temple of his Babylonian god. And after he put those sacred objects in his temple in Babylonia, do you know what he said? Nah, 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 nah. Our God is stronger than your God. Our Bel God is stronger than your God. Well, he could have said that. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, who was in charge of the palace officials, to bring to the palace some of the young men, the teenagers, Daniel and his friends, of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking men. If you happen to be a young lady looking for a boyfriend, how many of you prefer strong, healthy, and good-looking? He said, make sure they are well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good sense. Well, now, if you can find a young man with good sense, you have something going on. In fact, in the long term, the good sense may be even better than the good-looking and strong. And have the poise needed to serve in the royal palace. Teach these young men the language and literature of the Babylonians. Well, every society, ever since Nimrod started one of the first societies in Genesis chapter 10, we've given preference to people who are smart, good-looking, and have athletic ability. And if you have one or more of those, you are going to give preference in any society, our society included. That's the culture of the world. That's the way it has always been. The king assigned them a daily ration of the best food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for a 3-year period. And then some of them would be made his advisors in the royal court. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. The chief official renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belshazzar, Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, Azariah was called Abednego. So Daniel, the teenager, and his teenage friends are put through a 3-year indoctrination curriculum to reprogram these Jewish teens and replace their godly values with pagan values. In fact, they even changed their names. Would this be a lot for a 15-year-old to handle? Well, guess what? It's not going to stop Daniel from becoming one of the greatest prophets in the Bible. And it's not going to stop his 3 teenage friends from standing up for God even when their very lives are threatened. Daniel survived 2 pagan empires, the Babylonian and the Persian, with his faith intact and no compromise as far as his morality is concerned. In fact, he leads 2 kings, Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon and Cyrus of Persia, to faith in God. So you know what this says to us? You know what this says to you young people? You can rise above your circumstances. You can stay faithful to God no matter what. Now, there may be some things going on at school that you don't like. There may be some things with your friends going on that you don't like. There may be some things going on with employment that you don't like. But if these young guys can go through 3 years of indoctrination, have their names changed, and still stand up for God, you can stand up for Jesus Christ too, and He's going to give you the ability to do that. Just hang in there. Amen. The story of Daniel is bigger than Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. Now, that's big. Right? That is big. So to all of us, what do you do when your life is turned upside down? By a death, divorce, financial failure? 2 observations. We'll begin with 2 observations. Number 1 is don't be surprised by adversity. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised when you have some struggles as a Christian and that some problems come into your life. Don't be surprised. And although the collapse of the nation of Israel was a shock, it was not unexpected. Jeremiah and Zephaniah and Habakkuk had been saying, we're going to lose our nation if we don't follow God. And Daniel heard this growing up, and as a teenager, he knew the importance of morality. Just like our teens know the importance of morality. This is 1 Peter 4:12. Peter is writing to Christians who, some of whom, are being persecuted because of their faith in Jesus. He said, dear friends, don't be surprised at the fiery trials you are going through, as if something strange were happening to you. Understand that everything on earth is broken. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be a Christian. It doesn't mean that you can't be happy. What it means is that nothing on earth is perfect. Every relationship is broken. The weather is broken. Health is broken. Don't let adversity blow your faith away. Now, the typical human response in a crisis is, well, who am I going to blame? What we need to be asking is, what am I going to do? Generally, there are 4 sources when it comes to our problems. Number 1 is myself. Hello, Bruce. Tell us something we don't know. I cause a lot of my own pain because of the decisions that I've made, some not so smart. And sometimes my old worldly nature rears its ugly head and creates problems in my life. So sometimes we create our own problems because of the decisions that we make. Number 2, we have problems because of the world. You see, the world wants to pull you down as a teenager and others, just like it tried to pull Daniel down. And how does the world go about pulling you down? By making you feel foolish for being a Christian and living by a moral standard. The world makes you feel foolish and dumb and stupid if you don't engage in premarital sex. The world makes you feel foolish and dumb and stupid if you believe we are here by creation rather than accepting evolution as the means of our being here. Make you feel foolish. And that's how it has always been. But you do not need the approval of the world to be happy. In fact, the world's approval is not going to give you true inner happiness and peace. And then the third source of our problems is Satan. I guess Satan ultimately is behind all of our problems, but I thought I would identify him as his own entity. The moment you wake up, the devil is plotting ways to discourage you, defeat you, and cause you to doubt your faith in God. And then the fourth source of our problems, this one's going to surprise you. So don't gasp when I say it. God. Okay? Sometimes God allows your life to be shaken for good reasons. Despite the source of your problems, God can use every single one of them for good. And the source of your problems is not as important as the response that you choose to make to them. So don't be surprised by adversity. Observation number 2. God can use things for good. God can use things for good. In Jeremiah 29:11, well-known passage, and it's beautiful in its context too. It says, I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and hope. These words were spoken to Daniel and his nation, who found themselves 600 miles away from home in a foreign country called Babylon. And what this says is that God can bless you regardless of your location. We sometimes think the only place where God can bless us is when we're in the physical building that we call the church. Now, God can bless you when you're at school or you can't stand it. God can bless you at a job that you don't like. God can bless you in a relationship where you are struggling. God can bless you when your life is turned upside down like our good old bucket. So he's not limited on where he can bless you. If he can bless his people 600 miles away from their homeland, he can bless you anywhere. Now, God did 4 things with the problems faced by Daniel, and he's going to do the same 4 things for you and me. Number 1, God allows my life to be shaken so I can examine my motives. So I can examine my motives. Sometimes a problem exposes a weakness that you need to correct. Right? Sometimes you have a problem. Why do I have this problem? And it exposes a weakness that needs to be taken care of. In Jeremiah 17:10, it says, the Lord searches all hearts and examines deepest motives, so he can give to each person his right reward according to his deeds, how he has lived. So God examines our motives so he can give us what we need. And what you do in life is not nearly as important as why you do it. There are a lot of legitimate things you can do. And God says, I'm fine. I have no problem with this because I'm looking at your heart and your motivation. I know that you are good on the inside. Here's a question. Why did it take the Israelites 40 years to get across the desert to the promised land when geographically they could have made the trip in 2 months? God was testing them to show them that their faith was insufficient and that they needed to make some changes. In Deuteronomy 8:2 it says, remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the desert these 40 years to humble you and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He tested them 7 times in the desert, and 7 times they failed. And after each failure, do you know what he said to them? 1 more lap around the desert. And each lap took about 5 years. Throughout the book of Daniel, he is tested as a teenager. And he is tested in midlife. And even when things aren't going the way that he totally wants them to, he does the right thing anyway. So I want to ask you, and ask our teens in a rhetorical kind of way, will you choose to do the right thing even when life is not going exactly the way that you want it to? Number 2, God allows my life to be shaken so I can be more spiritual. God allows my life to be shaken. Well, I changed it a little bit. Let me read it. So he can make me more spiritual. So he can make me more spiritual. And that's exactly what happened to the nation of Israel 2,600 years ago. The people had fallen into deep idolatry, and God said, I am going to cure you of that addiction once and for all. And when God allowed them to be hauled off to a foreign country for 70 years, when their descendants came back, They never as a nation had a problem with idolatry again. They had been cured. So sometimes God allows you to go through a problem so you can get rid of all of the temporary stuff in your life and focus on the things that are going to last forever. If you've ever been in a situation where you were not sure about your future, what did you think about? Did you ask them, could you bring in my high school diploma one more time so I could look at it? Could you bring in the college diploma one more time so I could look at it? No, probably those things did not mean too much to you at the time. Certainly not as much as your friends and your faith in God. This is Proverbs 20 and verse 30, and you have to read it in the Good News Translation because if you don't, you sin. Kind of. Not really. This is Proverbs 20, verse 30. You tell me if this is close to reality. Sometimes it takes a painful experience to make us change our ways. Oh, yes. C.S. Lewis, the academic writer, said, God whispers to us in our pleasure, but shouts to us in our pain. True. That's true. So sometimes He allows our lives to be shaken so we can be more spiritual. So whatever you're dealing with at school or other people, you're going to come out of that and you're going to be stronger because of it. Number 3 is God allows my life to be shaken so He can point me in a new direction. God allows my life to be shaken so He can point me in a new direction. Sometimes we need to go in a new direction. In Proverbs 16:9, a person may plan his own journey, but the Lord directs his steps. And do you know how God points us in a new direction? It is so simple. I don't know why I didn't see it earlier. Through problems. Right. Problems change your outlook. Problems change your plans. And problems change the direction of your life. In Luke 15, there was a young man, perhaps a teenager, known as the prodigal son, which means the wasteful son. And he had asked his dad for his inheritance early. I know some of you have tried that with your parents unsuccessfully. But he gave him his inheritance. So what did he do? He went out and he invested in the stock market. He put a little bit in real estate. No, he went to a foreign country and partied 24/7. And as long as he had all this money, he had friends around him, and all the girls were hanging on him, and whoo, he liked this guy. And then his money ran out. He looked around, there were no friends. They weren't people. What was next to him were pigs. Because he ends up eating food out of a pig pen because that's all that was available. He had to hit rock bottom before he came to the realization, I need to make some changes in my life. In Psalm 119:59 it says, I have thought about my life and I have directed my feet back to your written instructions. I like that. Back to your written instructions. Problems force you to think about things that you would not normally think about when things are going relatively smoothly and you are on cruise control. Jonah, you remember Jonah, right? He had to be swallowed by a fish to get going in the right direction and spit up. Now, I don't believe God is going to appoint a fish to swallow you, but if we let the fish be a metaphor for our problems, we get swallowed and spit up all the time. And you start going in another direction. So God allows my life to be shaken so He can point me in a new direction. Number 4 is God allows my life to be shaken so He can develop my character. So He can develop my character. Margaret Clarkson, a long time ago, wrote a book with a rather paradoxical title. Grace Grows Best in Winter. Well, that's kind of a strange title because things don't normally grow in winter. Well, this far south they might, but in other places they don't. Nothing grows. The point of the book is that spiritual maturity is possible during the darkest days of your life. Unemployment, loss of a loved one. Remember that there is no maturity without growing pains, and the very thing that discourages you is the very thing God is using to develop you. And Daniel experienced pain in his life, and he was tested again and again as a teenager, and we'll see this next week and the following week. He was tempted in midlife and in older life, yet his godly character grew the entire 70 years that his life is recorded in Scripture. So Peter said this to Christians. But after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who calls you to share his eternal glory and union with Christ, watch this. This is where it gets good. Will himself perfect you and give you firmness, strength, and a sure foundation. Why? Why is he going to give you those things? Because you haven't given up your faith in God. And you are focused on heaven. Not your car, not your cash, not your career, not your clothes, but the Lord. And we're going to learn from Daniel to never give up our faith even when we are threatened with a lion's den. A lion's den, mind you. Oh. And we're not talking VBS here. Hey, what we had set up for VBS, the lion's den, we maybe need to put that up in a couple of weeks. Maybe we need to put the lion's den up here. But there's a lot more to the lion's den than just a historical event. There are principles that we can learn from that whole story, and we'll cover it in another message. Final thought is trust God when life doesn't make sense, which is going to be, I don't know, it varies. We could say 82% of the time. A few things make sense. A lot of things don't make sense. Whether it makes sense or not, you have to trust God. Because there's things in school that don't make sense. Things at home don't make sense. Things in association with your friends don't make sense. But you can't give up your faith in God over it. Hold on to your faith like Daniel and his teenage friends. They're going to threaten the teenage friends with fire. And these guys aren't going to compromise their morals. This is Proverbs 20:24. Since the Lord is directing our steps, why try to understand everything that happens along the way? I love it in the Living Bible paraphrase. And so I'm going to say something, and I'm joking, I'll tell you ahead of time. I will pay for any members of this congregation to get this verse tattooed on their forearm. You can go down to Gulf Coast Tattoo or wherever you go for your tattoos. I'm sure you have a tattoo location. Now they'll have to put it in small letters, but they can have right good. Since the Lord is directing our steps, why try to understand everything that happens along the way? This verse has helped me so much. I believe the Lord is directing my steps, and of course He's not violating my free will, but I'm not really taking much time to focus on exactly how He does it. There's a lot of things that we're just not going to fully understand. You know, when you flip the light switch, do we really understand what happens? I mean, they can tell you that the electrons are going back and forth. We had a student who attended here a few years ago, and he was up at South in the School of Engineering. He's going to be an electrical engineer. And I asked him about what happens when you flip a switch, and he said, well, we can tell you kind of some things that go on, but it's still called the theory of electricity. It's still the theory of electricity. So there's things that go on and happen, but we don't understand all the details of how God is working. So Proverbs 3:5-6 says this. Trust the Lord with all your heart. We can do that. Don't depend on your own understanding. Don't depend when there's clear scripture. Don't depend on your own understanding. When you're in that situation where you're being tempted, don't depend on your own understanding. Remember the Lord in all you do, and He will give you success. So God is going to give you, me, spiritual success in the same way He gave it to Daniel. Now, when we read this passage and we read success, we immediately think, in an American kind of way, that you're going to be CEO of your company. Well, let me be very optimistic. When that happens, see how optimistic I was? When that happens, count it as a bonus. But that's not really the kind of success that's necessarily what it means in the New Testament. So, I have come up with my own definition of success. So here's my basic definition of biblical or spiritual success. The ability to consistently and cheerfully live by the godly values that will determine my eternal reward after my life on earth is finished. God is going to give you the strength to do that no matter what. And so I want us to be encouraged by the teenage Daniel, and the midlife Daniel, and the Daniel, old, I want to say old age, but the mature Daniel. Yeah, it's a blessing. We have so many beautiful young people here, and it's incredible to see their faith. I mean, it stuns me, and I'll be talking to some of our teens, and they'll make a statement. Wow, that is so deep. It's incredible. Part of it, I'm sure, are the parents that they have. Some of it's their environment. Nurture, nature, a combination of things. But you young people are so awesome. And some of you who went up to Lipscomb, Stephen sent me the link, so I was there too. And it was exciting. I was thinking, this is great that our young people are here. And so many participating. So don't give up your faith in God no matter what. So come back. You can come back on Wednesday, but come back next Sunday. And we're going to talk about Daniel and his 3 friends and how they're trying to be forced to give in to social peer pressure. And we'll talk about how you can resist that. I would like to close with this prayer at the end of your outline. Since I put it on the outline, I think I slightly edited it, so mine's going to read slightly different. I think I added a phrase. But you can follow along with me, and then we're going to have our invitation. Father, I want to trust you with all my heart. I'm not going to depend on my own understanding for determining the pathway to heaven. I want to honor you in everything I do at work, at school, at home, and at church. I know you've promised to give me biblical success. Teach me through the life of Daniel how to cheerfully love you and trust you with all of my life. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to sing an invitation hymn, and if you have a particular need, please let us know what it is while we stand and sing.